Hello everyone, this is Yaakuro with another UE4 tutorial. In this episode we will continue with our VR game and start modifying our enemy class. And if we have time we will create a new actor that will spawn those enemies into the scene, and we can modify that. For example, spawn it in random time or random positions and so on. So let's start the editor in the meantime while we are looking into our enemy class, because there is one issue we should look at. Last time we wrote this part here that will calculate the direction from the enemy to the player and use that to create the impulse value that we will apply to the mesh. The thing is, this direction will point directly to the feet of the player, and that is not what we want. So let me show you what I mean. So let's drag this actor, this enemy, into the scene and simulate, and you will see it flies. So here's the camera, the player. It will fly to the feet, and that is not what we want. So we want the enemy fly around the chest area of the player. For that we will use a workaround and just put an offset. Anywhere, blueprint, read to write, because we like to modify that, and maybe we might modify that within the blueprint scripting area too. So vector, let's call this vertical offset. And then we will initialize this with a default value of, let's say, 130 centimeter, and add this here, and all those locations are in world coordinates, so that should be okay. Now let's compile this. Okay, let's have a look now. And this looks better. Oh, wait a minute. What? Oh, I see. It just looked a bit strange. So, yeah, this looks better. And now we have another issue. So, if the player wasn't able to hit this box or the enemy, it will fly into this direction, and it will do that forever. That means the actor will be alive forever, and that is what we don't want. So we should definitely kill this actor after a while. So let's open here our blueprint for the enemy class, and if you select this class defaults and go to this actor section, we can set it here to around, let's say, 10 seconds, and then it will auto destroy. When the user hits this enemy anyway, we will destroy it. Okay, and okay, yeah. So the next is, let's create another actor, oops, that will spawn those enemies into the scene. Let's call that the enemy spawner. And within this actor, we will, for example, say how many enemies we want to spawn at the time, and we will use a timer to spawn those enemies in a specific interval and distribute them in random locations and so on. So that is the reason why I'm using an actor, so we are more flexible to change things. We could put that all into the level blueprint, but that makes things really not so flexible. Okay. So let's say first we want to be able to say how many enemies we want to spawn at a time. Edit anywhere again, because we want to expose this to the editor and be able to modify the default values, and we might do something within the blueprint area. So blueprint read write, that will create the getter and the setter for this property, and it's going to be an integer, and we call this what? Number of enemies to enemies. Yeah, that's okay. So let's say for now 2 at the same time. Let's say 3 at the same time. We could spawn those enemies now in a for loop here inside this begin play of this actor. The problem is we can't really loop it here, so we want to spawn them always in a time interval. So what we need is a timer, and that is fairly simple. We just create a timer handle, let's call this timer handle. And inside the actor, if I remember correct, it was, what was the name? Get world timer manager. We can set the timer using our timer handle. Then we pass a delegate. That would be just a function we will define in our enemy spawner actor class. The enemy spawner handle timer finished. Then the rate is the interval, and let's make a U property out of this. Let's say spawn time and the loop, and the last parameter we don't have to specify. So we have to define this function for now. And we need this spawn time, and that would be a float. Let's say every 2 seconds for now. So every 2 seconds we will spawn new enemies into the level. So let's try to compile this. Oops, I made a typo. Okay, I forgot something. Let's look into this. Timer. Oh, user class. Sorry about that. That is, of course, this pointer. And we will spawn the enemies in this handle timer finished member function. So every time the timer finish, we will do the spawning. That seemed to compile. Okay, and now we said we have the number of enemies. Let's use a simple integer for that. And here we are going to spawn our enemy. Now we will have this problem. So we say here a location, then a rotation. We just use 0, so which is an identity rotator, so we don't need any rotation information, and that's it. Now the thing is, if we say here the enemy, we cannot specify our blueprint version which we defined here. Where is it? Sorry. So this one. So we can't specify that because this is in the editor level. To be able to do that, what we can do is we go back here and add a new property, and it's called what was it again? T subclass of a enemy. Come on. And we call this the enemy class. And we have to include this here. The enemy. Include the enemy. And we will use this class information, which we will specify in the editor. Use this to spawn the enemy actor. So, and now we should define the location. I was thinking that we spawn those enemies in a horizontal line somewhere far in front of the user, and they should be spread it around specific meters, like I don't know, to the left 3 meters, to the right 3 meters, and the same in the vertical. So we need 2 random values. One is float horizontal offset, and we use the random float in range. So the minimum would be, let's say, minus half horizontal offset. So we have to define this variable, and we do the same now for the vertical axis. Let's say vertical offset. Let's define those here and use a U property again. And it's going to be a float. And let's say the horizontal around, let's say 5 meters. So in some would be 10 meters on the horizontal line. And the vertical offset, I don't know, maybe 3 meters. Oh, that's not meters, it's centimeters, 500 and 300. Yeah, we can play around with that later. And we add this to the location of the actor we're going to, of this actor, of this enemy spawner. That would be effect location, get actor location. Then we add the horizontal, let's do this, location Y, Z, vertical offset. And I think that's it. So we set the timer, and every time it will spawn after finishing. And okay, let's compile and see. I'm sure I made a typo again somewhere. Oh, you see? Okay, we have to specify that. Include header, include Kismet math library. I mean, it's too late to say that, but just feel free to go forward on YouTube. So because it takes really a long time in this episode to get to the point, but this worked. So let's test this now. Let's remove this actor and create the enemy spawner blueprint. The enemy spawner. Let's look at the default values, number of enemies, spawn time. Yeah, so we have to set the enemy class. That would be the blueprint version of our enemy class. And that's all okay. So let's drag this, for example, yes, somewhere around here. And now the enemy should spawn along. Oh, wait a minute, that's X. We made a mistake. That should be Y. Okay, let's see. Yeah. That is wrong. Let's fix that. It's always I'm doing wrong. So horizontal offset. Okay, so let's see again. This time it will be Yeah, kind of. Okay, let's try this. So the enemy spawner, let's say the vertical offset is 0, and we increase this to 7 meter. Yeah, that's correct. That's cool. So, and now it flies towards the player. And the last thing, let's try to use oh, maybe not. So let's do that in the following episode, else it's going to be too long. So if you have any questions or suggestions, always feel free to leave me a comment. Thanks for watching, and hopefully seeing you in the next episode.